Alright, I get it!
So, y'all want an anti-hero Mount Rushmore, huh? Well, I can't exactly act like I don't understand why. I love moral pillars of truth and justice just as much as the next guy, but sometimes it's nice to see a roguish renegade that plays by their own rules to take out the scum of the earth. Even if the way they do it is questionable to say the least. The people love them a morally questionable hero. But before I delve into which anti-heroes the people love the most, let's briefly go over the guidelines that we're using for this video. For starters, before we go on judging anti-heroes, we should define what an anti-hero even is. An anti-hero is a protagonist that is heroic but lacks traditional heroic traits like idealism or optimism. An anti-hero will commit actions the audience generally views as good, but their methodology is morally questionable to say the least. For those of you who have seen the other Rushmore videos, you can skip to this timestamp here. But for all you newcomers, only Marvel and DC characters are in contention. The characters in contention will be judged not only by their relevance and cultural impact, but my own perception of said relevance, and my personal biases. The characters will be placed into 3 separate Rushmores, one for Marvel anti-heroes, one for DC anti-heroes, and a third combined Rushmore that is made up of the best of both of the Marvel and DC Rushmores. The final aspect of this video that you need to understand
is that I am an endless, ageless elder god, and what I say becomes law. In all disagreement, we reason enough to be banished to the netherrealm.
With all of that out of the way, let's get straight into the Anti-Hero Mount Rushmore. DC is not the brand that immediately comes to mind when you think of anti-heroes. For good reason. They built their universe off the backs of some of the most iconic and instantly recognizable pillars of justice of the 20th century. However, don't let DC's squeaky clean Boy Scouts fool you. Underneath the surface, there are great anti-heroes to pick from, like our first entry in the DC Rushmore, the Red Hood. Jason Todd, the second son of the Bat, was actually hated when he was first introduced. When Dick Grayson left The Dark Knight, DC writers quickly knew they had to give Batman a new young sidekick to bounce off of. And their brilliant idea was to do Dick Grayson. Again! I shit you not. Jason's original origin story was literally a carbon copy of Dick Grayson's. And for some reason, the fans loved Dick and hated Jason. The fans hated Jason so much that in 1988, a telephone poll was launched by DC that would determine Jason's fate after the Joker had kidnapped him, and the fans voted to kill the child. But it's after his death and subsequent resurrection where the reason Jason makes this list becomes obvious. Jason was resurrected after Superboy Prime punched a hole in reality. It's a long story. Because that story event was a general restarting point for DC in general, Jason was given his own backstory. But more importantly, after Jason was brought back, he donned a new identity and a new perspective on his former mentor. And that relationship with the Dark Knight is part of what makes him so fascinating, and, spoiler alert, the reason why Batman is not going to be on the Rushmore. Red Hood, after being revived, heads back to Gotham to take control of the gangs overrunning the city and get revenge on the Joker, the man who killed him, and Batman, the man who refused to avenge him. Jason doesn't just believe Bruce failed him, but believes that Batman has failed at his role as Gotham's protector, as Batman's rogues gallery treat Arkham like a revolving door. Instead of relying on the corrupt Gotham criminal justice system to hopefully contain the freaks, Jason plans to put them down, for good. The Red Hood shows the audience exactly why Batman is not an anti-hero, by contrasting his actions with Batman's. Batman may be dark and brooding, but he is ultimately an optimist. He does believe that Gotham can change for the better if they have a beacon to show them the right direction to turn to. Batman even believes his rogues gallery are capable of rehabilitation. It's just after years and years of hearing the I've changed act, he's grown a tad skeptical and needs to see the change for himself. Red Hood, on the other hand, while he cares for the innocent and does want to make the world a better place, views Batman's idealism as naive. To Jason, the scum that runs Gotham's underworld aren't worth waiting on to see if they organically have a change of heart. But Jason also knows that if you cut off one head of the criminal underworld, 2 more will grow back. Hence his plan to regulate crime in Gotham rather than attempt to fully eliminate it. His ideological skirmishes with the Dark Knight are some of the most iconic Batman moments. Red Hood is one of the only characters in DC that can get into an argument with Batman and win. Jason Todd has had plenty of stories and moments that are not related directly to Batman, like his role as the leader of the Outlaws. But ultimately, what makes Jason Todd an effective anti-hero is the comparison to his adoptive father. Jason is what Bruce could be if Bruce's strict moral adherence to his ideology didn't get in the way. And it makes you ask the question, would Gotham City be better off if Batman was more like the Red Hood? One question that we shouldn't be asking is why the main man, Lobo, makes the Rushmore. Made to be an over-the-top satire of anti-heroes as a genre, more specifically, edgy 90s comic book characters, everything about Lobo is so stupid that it loops back around to being awesome. Take Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and Deadpool, put them into a blender, add some gear, and a Black Sabbath CD, and then you have Lobo. He held doctors hostage to force them to add a device to his brain that allows him to listen to his favorite music in his head forever. He owns a group of spacefaring dolphins that he takes care of and loves. He slaughtered his entire race, either because he wanted to be unique in the universe, or just because he was bored. He's an immortal because he's been permanently banned from both the gates of heaven and hell. He's an over-the-top, crazed, violent asshole, a Looney Tunes character trapped in the DC universe, strong enough to tango the likes of Superman, but instead of trying to rule the galaxy, just uses his power to kill for money and feed his pets. He is the true definition of lawful neutral, as his word is his bond, and he always follows through with his agreements. With the other slots on this Rushmore, all of the other characters have deeper reads into their psyche and motivations that audiences grow closer to, but Lobo is an open book. What you see is what you get. He makes the list simply because he radiates fun, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here's hoping that Jason Momoa can capture that chaotic, crazed, and badass energy in the Supergirl movie, so more people can be introduced to the main man. One character that does not require any introductions, and takes the 3rd slot on the Rushmore, is Harley Quinn. For those of you who have seen my villains Rushmore, you would know I included Harley in the modern age Rushmore. And if you haven't, then spoilers, I guess. But it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Harley is one of the few DC Comics characters that was not created for the comics specifically. She was created for the Batman the Animated Series. She was created to be a Joker henchman that adds to the Carney gimmick, but over time, the writers fleshed her out in episodes like Harley's Holiday, Harley and Ivy, and especially Mad Love, the episode that delves into her history as an ex-psychologist that is used and manipulated by the Joker. The episode also delves into the toxic relationship that she has with the man and showcases the seemingly endless cycle that she's found herself perpetually stuck in. It's a harrowing viewing experience, as many audience members wish she could be able to break free from the Joker's spells. So when she does eventually break free from the Joker's control, her heroic side starts to show. She's worked with Batman many times, and even the entire Justice League. Harley was always a kind and caring person, but that caring person she always was fell under the surface of Joker's manipulation. For her kindness and compassion, not to mention her soaring popularity inside the comics and out, she easily makes the Anti-Hero Rushmore. There's one slot left on the Anti-Hero Rushmore, and I'm just gonna rip off the band-aid right now. Catwoman takes it. Look, I like Constantine and Swamp Thing, but neither of them are as iconic as Catwoman. Even combined, they don't stand up to her image. Catwoman is the most iconic comic book femme fatale, and at least top 3 in number of face-heel turns. Like Harley, I put Catwoman on the villains Rushmore, but unlike Harley, Catwoman's alignment is always flip-flopping to what currently benefits her at the moment. So much so, that I was having a hard time determining if she even counted as a villain, given how many times she spends helping out the heroes. Even when she is on the wrong side of the law, Selina goes out of her way to help the more vulnerable members of Gotham. She was never one of the chaotic, power-hungry, or insane denizens of Gotham's underworld, just a thief with a moral code. A perfect example of a timeless adage. Just because you're a bad guy, it doesn't make you a bad guy. The duality of her character is what makes her so beloved, not to mention her relationship with the Bat. Catwoman and Batman's relationship on paper sounds like it wouldn't work, as a masked vigilante and the cat burglar he chases shouldn't have too much in common. However, Bruce and Selina bring out the best traits in each other. Bruce brings out more of Selina's morality, and Selina brings out Bruce's humanity. They need each other, plain and simple. And speaking of needing something, I need a segue to talk about the Marvel side of this video. So, this one will do. In order to set themselves apart from the already previously established and dominant DC, Marvel Comics made a quick effort to differentiate themselves from their counterpart in many ways, but the most relevant is that Marvel heroes generally have less qualms with killing their opponents. Marvel's version of Superman, Captain America, kills his opponents. Even in the MCU, a sanitized and generally family-friendly offshoot of the comics includes the heroes killing their opponents. However, even amongst the more edgy and morally gray universe, one man stands out amongst the rest. Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, is the first name that I think of when I hear the word anti-hero. In a world of colorful, costumed heroes, giant robots, and intergalactic conflicts, Punisher stories are smaller scale, grounded, and human. Well, most of the time anyway. The Punisher is the quintessential anti-hero in superhero media because he feels like a character ripped straight out of a Robert E. Howard story or a classic western. A tired veteran that snaps after the death of his family, enforcing his own brand of justice whenever he sees fit. A lone ranger that walks his own path. The Punisher doesn't have any powers. He doesn't have $1 billion to fund his crusade. He only has his skills, his cunning, some weapons, and a small group of people who are willing to help. The reason the Punisher has persisted throughout history is pretty obvious when you think about it. Whenever you see some shit-kicking, scumfuck, piece of human filth get their way, all while good-hearted, humble people get fucked over time and time again, that primal, righteous rage that swells within you is why the Punisher is so popular. Watching Frank stomp out the cockroaches of society is one of the most cathartic reading experiences possible. But don't get it twisted. Punisher stories are not just mindless power fantasies that you can righteously jerk off to. Punisher stories are painfully aware of what type of person Frank has to be to scour the streets, hunting for PDF files, gangbangers, sex traffickers, the worst of the worst, every single night. And the idea that Frank does what he does for his family is laughable, considering that he got all of those gangsters pretty early in his crusade. He does what he does because the only thing that keeps him clinging to this world is hatred. Hatred for those who pervert innocence, for those who beat down on the weak, and the world that enables those who wish to cause harm. He hates the world because he cares for its people. He is a shell of a man that had one too many bad hands in life and spends the rest of his days giving bad hands rather than taking them. He's a very tragic character because there is a good man under the surface of Frank, but ultimately his crusade will stop him from allowing the few people that are in his life to get too close. Kind of like another character on the Rushmore. The next member of the Marvel Rushmore is the Merc with the Mouth himself, the one and only Deadpool. Now, one would assume that Deadpool is on the Marvel Rushmore for the same reason that Lobo made the DC Rushmore, a pure comedy relief that mocks superhero trends and shenanigans. And I can see the comparison. Lobo was made as a parody of anti-heroes as a whole, and Deadpool was a parody of Deathstroke the Terminator. I mean, come on, just look at their names. However, what separates Deadpool from Lobo is that under the surface, there is more than there may seem for Deadpool. Sure, Deadpool is a wisecracking, fourth-wall-shattering, irreverent, katana-slashing assassin, but there is a vulnerable man under the mask. A man that uses humor as a shield so others aren't burdened by his problems, because there is one thing he never wants to do again, is burden the ones he cares about. Wade perfectly fits the sad clown trope. A man that puts up a face of a carefree nature for everyone else around him, but the trials and tribulations of his life get to him more than he wants anyone to realize. A man, while gaining a godlike healing factor and near immortality, also gained a hideous disfigurement and a mountain of insecurities. But despite all of his deeper insecurities, he still goes out and tries his best to make the world a better place. For a price, of course. Wade is a bounty hunter like Lobo or Slade, but Wade is an ethical gun for hire, only taking jobs that he morally agrees with. Deadpool isn't some nobody either. He's gone toe-to-toe with the likes of Wolverine and won, survived being turned to ash from Thor's lightning, and his fighting style is so unpredictable that Taskmaster cannot get enough of a grasp of it to copy it. There's even a version of Wade that killed every other major character in the Marvel Universe, including his own writers. Wade will even make things harder for himself if he feels like shit's getting too easy, like ditching his teleportation belt. Wade's slightly crazed, spontaneous nature that masks a deeply flawed and depressed man is the reason why fans fell in love with him, and his nature is best suited for team-ups with more stoic and serious foils to react to Wade's insanity. Deadpool is the total package, badass, funny, subversive, and with a heart of gold that keeps fans coming back. And while we're on the subject of characters that keep fans coming back, why does Wolverine make the Rushmore? He is the best at what he does. That is all. Rounding out the Marvel Rushmore was a difficult decision. There are many good options to choose from. There are characters I've spoken about in other Rushmores, like Venom, Ghost Rider, Moon Knight, and Winter Soldier. Spider-Man's on-again, off-again love interest, Black Cat, is in contention, while Black Widow and Red Hulk, two former villains, round out the characters in contention. And yeah, it's pretty obvious why picking the last spot was difficult. There are many heavy hitters and only one spot between them. And I still don't feel like there's a clear choice. If we're talking about pure cultural relevance, in and out of the comics, then the clear winner is Venom. Due to the 90s and 2000s age of Spider-Man media being obsessed with the character. Not to mention the 2010s Venom movie trilogy being the only movies in the Sonyverse that anyone has ever even slightly given a shit about. Black Widow has headlined her own film, about a decade too late, but, whatever, and was a massive role in the biggest comic book franchise of all time. And we can't bring up roles in the MCU without mentioning Bucky. Ghost Rider and Moon Knight are leaders in the most important category, being raw as fuck, and Black Cat is an interesting take on a Catwoman-style character. Instead of Selina and Bruce bringing out the best in each other, Black Cat and Spider-Man's relationship is a lot closer to what a superhero and a master thief's relationship would actually be like. Thrilling and passionate, but ultimately their differences will create a rift eventually. I don't think any of the choices available are bad ones, but I do have a decision to make, and the fourth member of the Marvel Anti Hero Rushmore is Venom. The Lethal Protector swings in to round out the list, not only for his above-mentioned popularity, but for his character arc and sick design. His design is so instantly iconic that Marvel capitalized on that popularity with the Lethal Protector run, morphing him from strictly a Spider-Man villain into the anti-hero we know and love today. Eddie Brock started out as an inverse of Peter Parker. While both started as photographers in the Daily Bugle, Eddie pushes a story revealing the identity of the villain Sin Eater, a story that was proven false when Spider-Man captured the real Sin Eater. Shortly after, Eddie's wife divorced him, and instead of taking responsibility for the role he played in his own downward spiral, he fully blamed Spider-Man, and after bonding with the symbiote, vowed to kill him. However, after teaming up with Spider-Man, he put aside his hatred for the Wallcrawler and formed a truce with him. Over the years, Eddie has his ups and downs on the path of heroism, and the symbiote got passed around more than a blunt at Snoop Dogg's house. But Eddie eventually gets the symbiote back, became a god, and has become a good man and a better father. Redemption is a key aspect in many anti-hero stories, and when written well and given time, can be one of the best aspects of comic book stories. Even Venom, the guy who would gobble up heads like Tic Tacs, can use his great abilities for the betterment of others. Eddie wasn't always a good man, but despite the many bumps on his journey, he came out the other side better for wear, rather than worse. Well, now that we've finished up the Marvel and DC Rushmores, it's time to see which of these 8 heroes truly represent what it takes to be an anti-hero. Who amongst these iconic anti-heroes gets to claim the right to sit on the anti-hero Mount Rushmore throne? There's been a lot of build up to this moment as is, so I might as well stop dilly-dallying and just get to it. I've stated it before, but Punisher is the first name that I think of when I think of anti-heroes, so he's a shoo-in. 7-year-old me would have a conniption if I snubbed Venom off the list. And no discussion about anti-heroes is complete without the Merc with the Mouth. This leads us with the last slot on the Rushmore. The last slot that belongs to the Red Hood, the red-headed stepchild of the Bat family. Now, if I were to make this list purely objectively, I would replace Red Hood with Wolverine. But these 4 represent what it means to be an anti-hero to me personally. It's not that I dislike Logan or any of the other characters that didn't quite make the final cut, but I just resonate more with these 4 than them. With the character pool as full and congested as the anti-hero subgenre of comics, you could reasonably have dozens of combinations of characters representing the best anti-heroes, and it would be hard to go wrong with any of these finalists making the final Rushmore. And I am eager to see what you in the comments have to say about who you believe is the best of anti-heroes. Because isn't the real anti-hero Rushmore the friends we made along the way? I was the Boomer Zoomer. And before you all rip me a new asshole for not including your favorite anti-hero, just know that I was Zoomin'.